Oh my gosh. Okay, let me turn my sound up. Okay. So first off, welcome. Okay, so I'm gonna do an introduction. I'm not good at this
Me
at
too.
all. Okay, so I'm just gonna wing it. Okay, so this is the lovely Danielle Henderson, who I absolutely adore. Danielle is a TV writer for Maniac and Divorce and Difficult People, which is one of my favorite shows ever. So good. Retired freelance writer, former editor for Rookie. You may know her from Feminist Ryan Gosling, which is a fantastic website that was then turned into a book. Um, has a really wonderful podcast that I listen to all the time called I Saw What You Did Pod. So funny. You should definitely be listening to it. She's been published in the New York Times and the Guardian and all sorts of different places. And now her new book, The Ugly Cry, a memoir, which is so good, has just come out. I will tell you if you are watching this. Let's see so we're gonna get book plates, which Danielle so wonderfully signed, and then they got rained on and were ruined. So she very kindly did a whole bunch more and overnighted them, and so we should get them probably the next day or so, and your book will go out with those so yeah, and one more housekeeping item. So Danielle and I are going to have a talk and reading and all of that stuff. And if you have any questions, just drop it on the bottom where it says the Q&A. You can just drop your questions in there, and then we can go to that and answer any questions.
That was an awesome intro. You mentioned stuff I forgot I even did.
Did I make up stuff? Every once in a while, I want to make up stuff just to see, just to be, if people will be like, that's not me.
She flew a jet plane. She rappelled down the building.
Right? Remember when she saved all those orphans in Haiti? You were like, I just did feminist Ryan Gosling. I like make you feel bad about yourself. I didn't save any orphans. I'm like, no, is that not you? Oh.
But thank you so much. I cannot tell you how grateful I am to you as a writer and as a friend and as a person, and just for all of your support. And thank you for putting on this event. This is so
Oh
cool.
gosh. It is absolutely my pleasure. And I not only was I so lucky to be able to read your book like way in advance, which I was so excited about. But this book is so good, and I have now read it 3 times in a row because it's so. Oh, we're going to talk all about it. But first, would you like to maybe do a little reading?
I would love to, and I'm just going to read from the introduction because I
I'm going
think
to
it's great.
stop my video so that you don't see me.
Oh, I would love to. I'm not going to look it up anyway. It's fine. Okay. I've never seen my grandmother bake a cookie, wear a shawl, give good advice, or hug a child unprompted. I have, however, heard her curse so intensely I swear she was making some of them up on the spot, watched her obsess over horror movies with an academic intensity, and listened to her frequent lectures about the reasons every woman should not only carry a knife at all times, but fully be prepared to use it. A man wants to put his hands on you? Carry a little secret knife, cut his throat, ask questions later. Her favorite TV show is The Walking Dead. She likes to confidently conjure up strategies to survive the zombie apocalypse from her wheelchair, all of them involving rigged up weaponry and fire. She knows she would triumph after a lifelong cultural diet of Creature from the Black Lagoon, Creepshow, Hostel, and Saw, and she has no problem thinking up ways to kill anything that moves. And I was raised by her. It wasn't planned that way. I had a mom once, and along with my brother, we had a life together. When she left us at my grandparents' house for a weekend, none of us knew she wouldn't be coming back. I certainly didn't know I would spend the rest of my childhood with people who had already retired and thought their child rearing days were over in the 1970s. In the whiplash of trauma and figuring out how to adjust to this new life, dropped into the care of a foul-mouthed retiree, I realized it was up to me to figure out how to survive. So I would take respite in the bathroom, the only sun-filled room in the house where I could read in relative peace. Every single person in my family yelled at me when they saw me carrying a book into the bathroom, which I did constantly. No matter what my business was in there, I usually sat on the toilet reading until my legs went numb. I shared a bedroom with Grandma, a twin bed under each window. It wasn't exactly my own space. She had already made me take down my Led Zeppelin poster, not wanting to look at those sweaty white boys on the few days a week she crawled up the steps instead of falling asleep on the couch. The bathroom was the only true privacy I had in the entire house. Danny, no. Other people have to use the bathroom, you know, Grandma said, pulling her lips into a terse line as I walked through the living room. So then knock, I said, annoyed. Are you giving me lip, child? The library is right down the road. If you're in there for more than 10 minutes, I will knock down that fucking door, little girl, Grandma called after me. When I wasn't letting my legs atrophy on the can while I finished chapter after chapter, I pulled back the shower curtain and climbed into the old bright blue clawfoot tub, using any towel hanging up behind the door as a pillow. I fell asleep in there once and woke up to Grandma standing over me. All of the skeleton locks had long been painted over in this old house. None of the doors locked. It was easy to burst into any room if, like Grandma, you didn't value basic human privacy as a rule. Oh no, you are not allowed to sleep in the tub and hold this goddamn bathroom hostage when you have a perfectly good bed upstairs. She was pulling down her polyester elastic waist pants, elastic waist pants before I could even fully get the sleep out of my eyes, and farted loudly as she sat down on the toilet. Ugh, Grandma, I yelled, scrambling to stretch my long leg over the side and get out of the tub. Should have thought about that before you stayed in here for 2 hours, she said, gently unfurling some toilet paper. You can sleep anywhere, but this is the only place I can shit.
So good. So good. Yeah, so I want to start with the fact that we have so many friends in common. And for some reason our paths never crossed. And I had all of these people who were like, have you met Danielle? Have you met Danielle? Aren't y'all best friends? Aren't y'all? And I was like, I don't no, they seem cool, but I don't know. And then finally Miley was like, you two have to talk to each other, even if it's on email. And we became friends. And as I was reading the book, and I was like, okay, so you hid in the bathroom to read books, you love Doctor Who, you have a horror loving grandmother who got you into it. We're the same person.
Exactly.
Not in every scenario, but you know, but I was just like, okay, yeah, how were we not friends before? So I'm very glad that we are now.
And I'm surprised too. Like I went to a couple of blog her events, but I never crossed paths with anyone that I actually like loved to read, strangely, because I was too timid to be like, hello, I love reading your blog. So I went to a couple of events, but never never crossed paths. But this is beautiful. And Miley is the absolute greatest. She took the photo that I'm using for my promo.
She took the photo that I used for my author photo.
She's the best.
She is the best.
I'm very glad that our friends decided to put in the work and make it happen.
It was like a blind date that worked.
Yes.
So yeah, it was good. It was good. Let's see. So, okay, so I have all my questions down. Oh, and I know a bunch of people came in at the last minute. So if you didn't hear the first part, if you have any questions, just leave them in there's a little Q&A at the bottom, and then toward the end, we'll go through them. Okay, so first off, how is your pandemic?
Strangely okay, because I'm a pretty solitary person to begin with. And I spent most of the pandemic in LA, where it was just like a hellfire of virus the whole time. So I was very happy to stay inside for the past year. And I was very lucky. No one in my family, there were people in my family who did get COVID, but none of them got too sick. And my grandma managed to stay safe. That was my main concern. So it was kind of okay, but everyone was kind of scrambling to adjust to to life, like living it purely on the computer and purely in their homes. I was like, this is awesome. I burritoed in a blanket and I'm like, let me show you guys how to really live. This is how us introverts do it.
It's like a marathon I've been preparing for forever. And I check in on my extrovert friends, and I mean by text. I don't call them because that would be weird. But yeah, I text them and I'm like, "You doing okay? You're all right?" And they don't seem like they're doing too well. But now that they've got the vaccine, and then now they're slowly starting to come out.
And they're finding each other, which is great. I'm like, yes, go find your frolic in the field. Find your people who miss going to bars. I will still be on my like. This is the other thing. Nothing is going to change for me now in the post-pandemic. I'm not running out to go to the movies or the bars or parties or this. I'm just like, I'm glad I can hug people when I see them, but
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah. It has been a solid. It has been a nice year of not having any like, oh, all my friends are hanging out without me. So that has been kind of nice, where I'm like, oh yeah, everybody's at home just like me. We're all binge watching the same show. I love it. So yeah, yeah.
And I will say the best thing about the pandemic so far for me is, which is such a weird sentence to say, but the best thing about it is I discovered The Circle France, which is the only reality show worth watching. There's a pair of grandmas on there pretending to be one of their grandsons, and it is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life.
What, can I watch this on Netflix? I'm gonna. Oh my god.
It's called The Circle, and but you have to watch the French one only.
Okay, putting that on my list. Yeah, my husband's going out of town this weekend, and so yeah, I have the house to myself, and that's what I'm gonna be doing. Oh my god, I love it! I'm so excited.
I will rewatch it with you. You can text me.
I totally will too. Oh, okay. So let's talk a little bit about the book. And I know that most of you don't have it yet, so we're not going to do any major spoilers. Spoiler: Danielle doesn't make it. No, we're not going to do any major spoilers, but we can talk about some of the themes and some of the motivations and things like that. So first off, what made you want to write this? Because it is hysterically laugh out loud funny. And I'm not a laugh out loud person. I'm like the kind of person that even if I think it's really funny, I'll like read it and I'll go, that was very funny. And in my head, I'm like laughing out loud. But there were several times that I like guffawed, and Victor would be like, what are you doing? I was like, nothing, shut up. I'm reading. I'm enriching myself. But it also had, I mean, such just like painfully authentic stuff in it. And it was such a wonderful mix of those two, while still having this baseline of hope throughout the entire thing. I just thought it was so beautifully done, but it seems like it would have been really hard to write. So what made you want to do it?
It was really hard to write, and I think the primary reason I wanted to write it now is that I was at a point in my life where I was just facing like another big evolution. I've had all these moments where I've just always tried to survive. I've been in survival mode for so long. And when my TV writing career started to take off and I started being able to kind of slow down and focus on myself and my writing and my projects, I really got to think about like, what do I want to do? And for the first time, because I didn't have 3 jobs at the same time. And so I slowed down and I was like, all right, there's definitely something I want to say about this, but it wasn't even, a lot of people say like, I wrote this for the child that I used to be. I don't think that kid could have comprehended a book like this. Like, she was going through too much. But I did write it as a way to kind of synthesize my own life for myself now. And I really just wanted to acknowledge and honor where I came from so that I could move forward and honor and acknowledge where I was going.
So there's so much in this book that is so much that is, first of all, incredibly relatable, and even some stuff that, even though I didn't relate to it, you write it in a way that is so very relatable. You just really feel like you're there at the same time. Was it, when you were writing it, the people in the book, your family, your brother, um, your grandma, did you let them read it? Did they have a say in what got in?
Not at all. I let them read. I let my brother read it after I was done. And he's this guy. He's a total sweetheart. He's a year and a half older than me. But he looks like Drake. Like he has always looked like Drake since about 10 years before Drake was even born. So his life has been so different from mine because people just flock to him to do things for him, like, oh my god, you're so beautiful, let me be in your life. And I'm like the goblin sister in the corner, like, I'm gonna do everything myself. And so so I let him read it after I was done. And he sent me the most, like, we had a great conversation after, and he sent me the most beautiful text message, and he was really apologetic. He said, I'm so sorry that I didn't realize what you were going through when we were kids, and I wasn't there for you. He said he felt like he wasn't really there for me. And I was like, but we were both kids, going through it on our own. And, we eventually came together and have a great relationship, and it's fine. But I definitely could not have handled it if they were reading it as I was writing. As you can tell, the people in my family have very powerful voices, very powerful personalities. And I didn't want that kind of influence on what I was saying. And the beautiful thing too is that I didn't feel the stress and pressure of writing a memoir, and you might feel this way too, about your own books, but I wasn't worried about what they would think about what I was saying because they've heard all this before. So it's not like I was revealing something to my family members who are present in this book. They've heard about this, they know all of this. So it was kind of fun for me to be able to say, look, I put this all together in a story. But I wasn't worried that my grandma's going to say, like, I never said that. Like, she knows exactly how she talked to her. And as far as my mom is concerned, it's like, if you didn't want me to write the truth about who you are, you should have been a better parent.
Exactly. Let the chips fall.
Let them fall.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really loved is that every single person that you write about, that's in your family, your mom, your grandma, your brother, your grandpa, your great grandparents, like every single person, they are so fully well-rounded that sometimes I'm like, oh, I hate them. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, I love them. And then sometimes I'm like, how dare you? And then sometimes I'm like, oh, baby, no. And there was not a single person in your family who I didn't feel like you gave honesty and grace to. And that's such a hard thing to do with writing a memoir. So
yeah,
excellent job.
Thank you so much for recognizing that and saying that, because I think that was for me the fun, and also the kind of the beautiful thing about writing this book. Because when writing it is all you have. Once it's out in the world, it's not yours anymore. So I really tried to have some fun with the process. And finding the grace in the things that I was writing about came as a surprise to me, honestly. Like, I never really sat and thought too much about how I wanted to frame people. I just wanted to kind of report the stories as they happened. And in editing and going back and looking at things again, with different eyes, because I'm a different person at a different point in my own life. And at 43, I wrote a very different book from the one I would have written at 33 or 23. I was way too angry, way too into it, like way too, I hadn't dealt with my own emotions enough to really find that humor and grace. So I kind of feel like it happened at just the right time.
Yeah. So you were hilarious in all the stuff you do, in your TV writing, in the website, just in all the stuff that you do. You're always funny, and in this book in particular, and I do this thing because I'm bad with books. Like, for real, people are like, "What? You're a monster!" Because whenever I find something and I'm like, "Oh, that's really funny," or "That's really good," or "I want to remember it," I dog ear the bottom part of the book.
Me too. I have a system.
Get out! Really?
The bottom is for remembering things I want to write down, and the top is for remembering things that I want to point out to other people.
Yes! Oh my God. What? We're the same person. Yeah. But there were so many. And I would just like circle them, and I'd be like, oh, and this one, and this is so good. I wish I'd written that. That's so good. And so I was wondering if, because you're a writer and a creator, and I would say you're also a humorist just because you're so funny. Do you think that the humor comes from sort of surviving that's like something that we latch onto as like a defense mechanism, or do you think it was something that was always there?
I think it's a bit of both, but I use humor for a long time in my life. I used humor to deflect pain, and but I would have had a sense of humor no matter what growing up with my grandmother and growing up in my family. My whole family has a really good sense of humor, and we constantly are like busting each other's balls and just like really really just funny more than anything. And I think I did learn from my grandmother how to use humor in a way to kind of survive and be sustain yourself in any situation, because she would frequently make jokes about things that were painful, but as I've discovered in therapy, that's not always a really good thing to do. My therapist that I'm working with now, during our very first meeting, I said something and she's like, you use humor to deflect from the more painful and traumatic parts of your life. And I started laughing naturally. And then I burst into tears. And I was like, you are a witch. What is happening right now? I understand that like it is a survival mechanism. And in some ways, I'm glad that I've, again, like through therapy and through just growing and evolving, that I've learned other ways to express myself in that way. But humor is hugely important to me in my life. Like all my friends are funny. Like I look for the commonality I find with people is usually through humor. So it's very, very important to me to be funny. And it comes from survival.
Yeah. And I think humor is harder to do than so many of, the other genre. Like if I have to write something that's really hard or really like emotional and difficult, it's not that it's not hard, but I may struggle much more with finding something that's going to be funny.
Completely.
So yeah. And what's really wonderful is, especially throughout this book, there are just these wonderful, beautiful little hysterical things dropped in, so that every time that I would start to be like, ow, this is painful, I want to walk away from this, then I would read something like, if touching a spider kills you, well, I guess you were too delicate for this earth, and it was nice knowing you. My summers always started with a firm acknowledgement that I might die as a result of trying to enjoy them. I would just, oh my God. So there's so much, and I would highlight it. I'd be like, God, that's such a good line. And the timing on it, and it's so good. So good.
Like that is definitely, it's how I talk. I think that one of the things that I've appreciated so much of this past week and a couple of months is when people who actually know me are like, oh yeah, it just sounds like you talk like this. You'll drop something like horrific and then you'll make a joke. Telling a harrowing tale and then you're just laughing the next minute. So it was it wasn't by design necessarily, but it's just kind of how I talk. And I'm a very, my writing process is incredibly boring because it's very cerebral. So I think a lot about what I'm going to say before I even come to the page. And so by the time I sit down to write, I'm usually like ready to go. But it's all interior. And so I'm talking to myself for, however many hours, and then I'm writing it down.
So are you literally, because that's actually one of my questions was about your writing process. Are you literally talking to yourself, or is it just all in your head?
it's just all in my head. It's just all like I'll be thinking in dialogue and just kind of remembering, you know, especially in this book. Like when I do that with TV writing, it's like imagining characters and situations. But for this book, I definitely just went back into those memories and I was like, yeah, it's like just very like it's a very interior process. And when I sat down, I was like, yeah, I think that'd be kind of funny because and then I would write the scene and then write the emotion, you know, like this is what happened and this is how I felt. Like, too bad you might die. Too bad. Like, I guess you're going to spend your whole summer outside not going to the bathroom. That's just how it felt. And I had to tap into those emotions more than I did have to tap into the structure of the writing. So
Yes, yes. Well, it's interesting because there are several chapters that I've written in the past in my books that are in almost in conversation with other people who I'll read something that is so funny and it'll just be one like little line that'll be like, that reminds me of something that happened to me. And so I'll write a chapter about it. And so so in a way, like I have all of these chapters that are in conversation with, although they have no idea, with like Samantha Irby and Allie Brush and Shirley Jackson, and you just kind of look through and you're like, what? And there were several in here where I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm gonna have to call my sister and see if she has pictures of this because nobody's gonna remember, nobody's gonna believe that it really happened. And so good job.
thank you. It is the joy of my life right now is that any kid in my life right now between the ages of 7 and 16, so like my nieces and nephews, my goddaughter, they truly cannot believe how we were allowed to spend our summers in the 80s. Like they cannot get over it. And I'm like, no, we were outside all day. Just we were not allowed in the house.
Yeah, there was a canal by our house where where they would just put like dead animals, and we would just be like, well, I guess we're gonna go look for skulls, and we would, and you'd bike down there, and you could smell, you'd be like, I smell something dead, and you'd go toward it instead of away from it, and it's a little shocking actually that we never found a dead body there, although we did. Yeah, there were some stories. Speaking of stories, so I read somewhere, I think it was maybe on one of your bios, about how you survived a bear chase, and that is not in the book. So please tell me about the bear chase.
Yeah, so the book actually only goes up to age 18, which is really saying something about my childhood that I could get a whole book out of the first 18 years of my life.
Yes.
But when I was, the rest of my life, my adult life, my resume just reads like I was on the run from the law because I kept just saying yes to things and moving and trying things out. And I was totally aimless. But I still had to survive. So I always had to work. And after September 11th, I was working in New York City for the United Nations. September 11th happened, and I was like, 23, and I was terrified, and I was like, I'm gonna get out of here. So I sold everything I owned. I bought a car and I drove to Alaska. I was on the road for like 2 months. And then I got there and I lived in Alaska for 4 years. And actually, my next book is going to be about my memoir about living in Alaska. But so the bear chase comes into play when I took a job on the Aleutian Islands in a town called Naknek. Naknek was wild. I drove, I was doing HR, that's what I was hired to do. But in my downtime, I would just find odd jobs to do because it's kind of like an everyone pitches in kind of place. So I learned how to drive a forklift. I learned how to like take roe out of, salmon and herring. And I was doing the books one night down in the office, which was down by the beach. And I left late and I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a shortcut. Instead of going around the long way, I'm going to cut through the boatyard. And I turned the corner into the boatyard. One of the ships they didn't pack their garbage out, which you're supposed to do every night. And I could smell the brown bear before I saw it. And there was a brown bear on the boat, just digging around the garbage. I screamed like a cartoon and ran back into the office, which was thankfully like I was just around the corner of the building. And I watched this bear kind of pacing back and forth in front of the window. And I just kind of slept on the floor that night and just waited till the sun rose.
That is a horror movie.
Yeah, it was really bizarre. And I did try to make an escape later. I'm like, okay, it's been a couple hours, I can go back out. And I walked the other way, the way I was supposed to walk the first time. And I could hear the bear at the fence. And I was like, nope, back in, sleep on the floor. And this is again, most of my life stories come from like as an adult, most of my life stories come from the space of stupidity where I just made a dumb decision, like moving to Alaska. Like moving to Alaska in the first place alone as a Black woman in a car with New York plates. That was a fun trip. But yeah, the next book is going to be all about Alaska. So,
oh my God, I cannot wait. I took my parents to Alaska after my first book came out as like a sorry for writing about our life, kind of a blackmail. And I was so excited. I was like, I really want to see a bear. And my husband was like, no, you don't. I was like, yeah, it would be so exciting. And my kid was, oh, they were 6, I guess, at the time. And we went to this it was like you panned for gold and then you ate salmon and you cooked marshmallows and everything was outdoors and we did all the stuff. And we were walking back to the bus and somebody said, oh my God, there's a bear. And a bear had walked up right where we were, where the marshmallows were. And it was like eating the marshmallows and everything. And because I'm a good mother, I pick up my kid and I'm like, Haley, bear. And I run toward it. And I get right, there's like this tiny little stream. And I'm like, the stream will keep it away from us. The stream was literally 1 foot deep. And I was like, no, bears don't like water. That's what I was telling myself. And yeah, and then my mom comes up and she's like, you really shouldn't maybe bring your shit. Should we just go? And I was like, look, there's a bear. And she's like, I fucking know there's a bear. That's why everyone else is leaving. And then the guy that works there that was doing the salmon, he like walks up to the bear and he goes, Frank, get out, go on. And I was like, see, his name's Frank. Frank's not gonna hurt anybody. And my mom was just like, you're not a good mother, but I love you. So, yeah.
You're trying to give your child an experience, and what that experience was up in the air, and I think that's fantastic. Life is unpredictable.
They needed to meet Frank. Everybody needed to meet Frank. It worked out. It was fine. The bear didn't like water, probably.
That is so the way it is in Alaska too, by the way, with like any animal interaction. They're like, come on, like I'm late for work. And you're like, this is a moose that could step on your car in 10 seconds. And they're like, get out of here.
Oh my God. Let's see. Okay, so here was my next question is, okay, so you wrote about powdered milk, which I never tried powdered milk, but we got government cheese all the time, and I thought it was delicious. You didn't think it was delicious? Did Texas get a different government cheese?
I don't know, maybe it was a different dairy, because the government cheese was actually made the best grilled cheese sandwiches, but we weren't allowed to use the stove. We weren't allowed to use the oven. So I could only have like the benefit of the government cheese in its natural case or its natural state when my mom felt like making grilled cheese. So on its own, it was so hard to cut. Yes. It was like you had to like use one of those double-handed knives.
Yeah. We had a piano wire. You would use the piano wire to cut it. You could like murder someone and make cheese sandwiches.
See, that's what I appreciate. It's like you're learning a lot about life because this is how you can use actual piano wire in several different ways.
Right?
But the powdered milk was the worst. Like it just tasted terrible. It tasted like a slurry. It was usually gray, and I had to make it. And I'm like stirring the big pitcher like a cauldron, and then like all that effort for it to just taste like crap just felt so mean to me.
See, that was it. We didn't even have the option for that. Ours was, we got government cheese, government butter sometimes, and all the cherry peppers you could eat. And so we would get these giant cases of cherry peppers, just like, and every single time when you went to school, if you went through, and my mom was the lunch lady, and so and we couldn't usually afford like to actually eat there, even though she was the lunch lady. But I would always sneak back, and she would be like, "You can have cherry peppers." I'm like, "Everybody can have cherry peppers. Everyone in the school is allowed to have as many cherry peppers as they want." She's like, "Just have the cherry peppers." I'm like, "Mom, just let me have a slice of pizza. I'm just hungry." She's like, "You're fine. You're okay."
And again, this is the other thing about growing up in the 80s that I wanted to write about and wanted to kind of convey was that like, it wasn't an abject neglect because it was out of cruelty. It was like, our parents really thought we were fine and resilient and okay. Like they really did not see anything wrong with any of this. And so
Okay, I'm gonna quote you. This is another one of those. If your child was fed and moderately clothed, people turned a blind eye to your second degree murder adjacent shenanigans.
absolutely,
Yes.
yep, law
Oh
and
my.
order, letting your kids sleep on the porch, letting them like roam the earth. It was really, but it was important for me also to write about that because I think that in thinking about my life as a whole, I really did have so many years where there was just freedom and fun and goodness. And yeah, I just kind of I wanted to remember that as much as I wanted to connect with people over that. So there was definitely the balance that I was working for there, because I know that most of us grew up that way if we grew up in the 80s.
Right, right. It makes me wonder if like if kids now, if they read that stuff and they're like, that's not real, that couldn't really have happened. And meanwhile I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, it was so much worse than that. It was so like, how did we survive? I don't know. Like some of us didn't.
Some of us
That's all that, you know.
some of us didn't. I remember when the kids on the milk carton debuted, and it was very much like, now it's your responsibility to not become one of those kids. And I'm like, should you not be helping us with this? And they're like, here's a password, I don't know, like a secret, like peanut butter and jelly, and like if nobody says peanut butter and jelly, then don't go with them and you won't get murdered. And I'm like, this is not enough. I'm only 7, but it feels like this is not enough.
We didn't even have a password. My mom was just like, nobody's gonna want you. You are a drain. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but you're expensive to have around. Nobody wants another like gangly ass kid. You're fine. Calm down.
Bonkers. It's so wild, but I think it's that kind of. I'm so grateful for that kind of childhood, because I think it did instill in me this sense of independence and this sense of figuring it out. And if my brother ever wrote a book, his stories from the 80s would be 10 times worse, because they were just like literally riding bikes through the woods, uncovering dead bodies. Like I don't know what they were doing out there, setting stuff on fire. Like he just always came back in outside from a day of playing outside looking like he'd been crawling through a tunnel underground. Like it was just mayhem. So yeah, I think it was important to remember that was also a part of my life, and that there was a real, that there was a hard turn. And I don't know what would have happened if that hard turn hadn't occurred. But I did want to at least talk about the fun and everything that came before it.
Yes, yes. Well, that joy definitely comes out and just triggered in me all of these. I was like, oh my God, I remembered it. Oh my God, so it was lovely. Let's see. So, okay, so in one of the chapters, you write this really funny thing about getting your first tattoo, and you guys are gonna love it when you read it. But the tattoo that you wanted was the needle and the thread. Did you ever get that tattoo?
Never. I got the one that I wrote about in the book. And then I eventually got more tattoos, but never that one. And I think the moment was kind of ruined for me by this guy. Like I was like, I can't do something like this safely in a tattoo parlor. So no, I never did. But I still have the original. I've never had a tattoo removed or covered up. So
Oh my
just
gosh.
blank canvas in it through life. Like whatever I was thinking about that year, that's what's going on the body.
I think, if you have any like big scars, you could do the needle and thread, and it could look like, because I have like some knife wounds, and I'm always like, oh, wouldn't that be a good tattoo? But then I'm like, oh, but then people will be like, oh, knife, and then I'll be like, well, I just had my gallbladder removed. But still, it's still a knife wound. I mean, they didn't use scissors, so technically I still got stabbed. So yeah.
That could be in fine print underneath the thread. Like, look, I technically got stabbed.
Right? I still got stabbed, right? With all my little laparoscopic, and they're all small. So they're all like, here's one, and here's one, and here's where I had my hernia, and here's the, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's a great tattoo. I know I am saving. I think maybe when I'm older, I'm gonna get some cool like needle and thread style tattoos. Like when I have to stitch something back together, or when maybe that'd be a good like a gang style tattoo for all of us as we get older. Like we'll all go and get our needle and thread tattoo.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Well, I've never gotten one, so I keep waiting for something to happen for me to go like, oh, this
It is going to happen. Look, I just bought this house. I bought it because I know it's going to be my Golden Girls house where all of my friends are eventually going to come live when we're older. And we will just have a tattoo artist in-house.
Oh my God, that'd be fantastic.
If you're feeling the whim, we'll be like, just go for it. Go for it, baby.
But not the guy that did your first tattoo. Maybe not, he's not gonna live in.
No. I actually drove by there. I just recently moved back to my hometown, and I just drove by there last week when I went to Target. And the shop is still there, but I don't think he is still there.
Got it. Yeah.
Necessarily so, but that was a very fun chapter to write, because that was, as I started moving into the telling of the stories where it was like I was making decisions and I was kind of starting to live my own life a little bit, I realized that I was kind of an idiot. So that's really
That is the smartest realization. If no one has ever at a certain point gone, oh, I'm sort of a dumbass, then I question everything they've ever thought.
Completely. And it's that folly of youth where you're like, I'm so defiantly right about this, and then within months you're like, I don't think that was a good idea.
Right? Yeah, that's how I am with every decade. Like when I was like 20, I was like, man, I cannot believe I survived my teen years. And then I was 30 and I was like, what was up with me in my 20s? And then when I had 40, I was like, what is wrong with me for real? And now I'm like, I can see 50 and I'm like, I know I'm fucking stuff up right now. Like, I'm sure I am. I'm sure like 3 years from now, I'm going to be like, Jenny, what is wrong with you?
That's literally the path of our lives. That's how our lives go. It's just like, well, I guess I fucked that up too.
That's the next book title. Guess I fucked that up too.
There's no meditation about it. It's just like, yep, that was also terrible. I learned zero lessons about anything as life goes on.
So we have some questions in our Q&A. Let's see. So the first one is your magnificent chair. Please tell us about it.
This is a chair that I purchased when I lived in Harlem, when I lived in New York. So about like 8 years ago, I got this chair. I saw it on the street in front of a prop shop, and I saw it twice. Like I walked by it a couple times before I finally went in and said, "Is this for sale?" And they said yes, and then they told me the price, and I wanted to fall on the floor and hug myself. So I said thank you, and I scurried away. And then when I signed my contract for this book, I went and bought this. This is the first thing I did, was went and bought this chair. So it's just a chair that kind of goes up and over, and I call it, it's kind of a throne chair. Carrot, my cat, likes to sit on the top of it, even though he's not supposed to. And so we just look like a really cool tag team duo, like a cat on top of me in this big weird chair. So yeah, it was my first gift to myself for writing this book.
Oh my God, I love it. I have the exact same chair, except mine is like burlap and like just like sort of shabby. It's not as cool, but I got it like half price at I think like Restoration Hardware outlet thing. And the same thing, all my cats will hang over and put their paw down, and I'll be like, what are you doing? Get back up there.
Little game for them.
Right. Yes. Oh my gosh. Let's see. What was your favorite book as a child?
This is such a hard question to answer, because there's one book that I love, but I've actually forgot the title of. There was a book I read, and it was one of those scholastic books, so I don't think it was even like, it was like a mass market kind of book, but it was the first book I read about a kid who lived in an apartment, and I also lived in an apartment, so it just blew me away. But then the rest was pretty commonplace books that I liked. We didn't have YA back in my day. We had like you have your children's library card, and then you hit like 11 or 12, and just like they're like, read Peyton Place if you want, who gives a shit. My favorite books ended up being like adult books, so I really always loved Stephen King, the horror thing of course, but I loved reading like his novellas and Needful Things, and the things that kind of weren't turned into movies right away. I really when I discovered Jamaica Kincaid, it was like a revelation to me. And she's always been one of my favorite authors. And then just in terms of little kid books, like, or younger books, I always loved The Secret Garden. I loved books that kind of made me feel like there was a sense of escape in them. James and the Giant Peach, I loved when I was a kid because it, again, had a totally different family structure from most of the books I read, even though it was wildly fantastical and cruel. I loved reading about families that were different. So as a kid.
So good. So good. Yeah. And I started reading Stephen King when I was in 3rd grade. Literally stole it from my grandmother who got me into horror. So yeah.
They planted the seeds. Literally, they planted the seeds. They left the books around and you're like, all right, I'll read this.
Right, exactly. There's a cat on the front of it, and I'm like, Pet Cemetery. The cemetery is spelled wrong. I'm like, I can spell better than this. This must be made for children. This is made for children. Turns out it wasn't, but yeah.
Very no. But again, nobody was monitoring us.
Oh my God. I read all of the Flowers in the Attic books. I mean, just all these, and now I look at it and I'm like, Jesus, what? No wonder I was so worked when I was a kid.
VC Andrews tore through our school like a barn fire. I remember the first person who read it just must have passed it along like the Sisterhood of the Traveling Incest books. It was like
exactly what
all read them and we're like, oh my God, we were scandalized.
I remember like everyone reading it under the table at class, and there would always be one teacher would walk up and be like, what are you reading? Nothing. I know what that is. I know what's in that trash. We were all like, yeah, it is trash. What's on the next page? Have you gotten to that chapter yet? Oh my God, you're not even going to believe it. Don't eat the cookies. What's happening? Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so the next question is, how did you and Millie come up with the podcast? I am a huge fan. Shout out to Karen.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening. Millie is my co-host on I Saw What You Did, and she's a friend of mine, like an actual real life friend of mine. And we always went to the movies together. And Millie works for TCM. She's a programmer at Turner Classic Movies. But we both moved to LA around the same time. And so we would just constantly, going to movies was just a cornerstone of our friendship. And we would come out of movies and just be like talking for 2 hours and be like, we should start a podcast. But then both of us were kind of reluctant to do so because how cliche is it to move to LA and start a podcast? So we're both like, we'll just keep talking to each other. But then Karen approached Millie, who she was friends with, and said, we're developing this network and we would love to have your voice. And is there anyone that we want you to do a movie podcast? Is there anyone that you want to do a movie podcast with? And she very graciously said that she would do a movie podcast with me. So we came up with this notion of just presenting, creating themes, because it would be funny for us to create themes, and presenting a double feature. So we each present a movie to each other, and it's just so much fun. It really is a blast.
It's so good. I was listening today to the one of Hereditary, and I'm only about halfway in, and I'm so enjoying it because every movie I watch, I immediately am like, I want to dissect it. I want to go through the themes. What do you think this meant? What about this plot hole? We just watched The Quiet Place 2 was the first movie that I've seen since the pandemic. And I'm not going to say any spoilers, but as soon as we left, I was like, what about this? What about this? And my husband is just the opposite. He's like, we already saw the movie. We don't have to discuss it. And so I end up just going online and I'm like, what are all the things that I didn't catch in A Quiet Place Part 2? And I'll just talk to the internet.
I'm a big fan of dissecting movies and that to me is part of the joy of letting the movie live on, is kind of talking about all of the fun things that happened and the scary things that happened, but also dissecting it in that what did I miss kind of way, or what did you think about that? Oh, I thought about it totally differently. So it's
Exactly.
really is fun. And you're welcome to, I would love to have you on the show. You're welcome anytime to dissect any movie.
Oh my gosh. I would totally do it. We would have to do a terrible movie, like a movie that you would go, why would you make me watch this? Because I have so many of the most horrible horror movies. Oh, they're so good and no one will watch them with me because they're awful.
You would
Yeah.
fit right in. Millie would 100% watch them with you.
Love it. I love it. Let's see. This was, I don't have a question, but a big thank you for the hot heating pad tips that changed this 42-year-old's life. I cannot wait to read the book, and I'm also waiting for the audiobook.
Aw,
Did you record the audiobook?
I did, and
Awesome.
it was really fun. It was kind of, I did it over the course of a couple of weekends, and I'm glad that I spread it out because I thought I'd have my braces off by now. This was like my pandemic project, was to fix my teeth.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't. And so when I was recording my audiobook, after like 3 or 4 hours, I'm like, my mouth hurts. Can we stop?
No.
Like my mouth hurts because this all this metal. But yes, I did record the audiobook. It was very fun to do. And I learned that you're not allowed to sing lyrics when you're doing an audiobook. You have to speak them out. Because I have some David Lee Roth lyrics in the book, and speaking out his lyrics just felt wrong.
You know what you can do though is you can sing it, but not to that tune. So you could do it, but yeah,
Like to the tune of Happy Birthday or something.
exactly.
That's
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how you would do that. You might as well jump. Yeah. And people will be like, that's not how that goes. You'd be like, well, now I don't have to pay for stuff.
Exactly.
Let's see.
Upgrade your heating pads for sure. Upgrade to the XL and wet heating pad, not a dry heating pad.
Yes. Let's see. Where am I? Okay. Oh, that's a good question. Will this book be a Netflix movie in the future? Could be a winner since it is both serious and very funny. That's actually a really good question because as I was, sometimes there's books where as you're reading them, you can see them and you can hear the people, and this definitely had that.
Oh, that's so sweet. You guys are so nice. Yeah, it's what's strange about the journey of this book is that it took me about 5 years from start to finish. And I started with one publisher, I left them, and then started the process again with another publisher. But when I originally wrote the proposal for this book, my TV agent, who I was just starting out writing for TV at the time, optioned it, and it was going to be a TV show. Paul Feig was going to direct it, and it was going to be at like TBS. And that did not end up happening, thankfully, because they kind of just based on the proposal thought it was going to be a comedy. And I kept trying to tell them, like, there's really bad stuff coming. Like, it's not just a comedy. So that did not end up working out, which was great because now that it's its own full product, I definitely am taking some meetings, and I think I would rather see it as a movie than a TV show if it's going to be anything else, because I feel like I already just kind of told a full story, and I don't want to have to be making up facts about my family and my life for years. So I think that there will be something else happening, and I will give details about it as soon as possible.
Oh, very nice. Let's see. Love Your Throne Fabergé egg chair. I'm only halfway through, so please forgive me if food is mentioned and I get this totally wrong. Did salmon patties feature as a meal standard in your childhood? We're the same age, and your book brings back the memory of salmon patties. Also, we called our government cheese commodity cheese.
That's incredible. Commodity cheese sounds so fancy.
It does.
Monopoly cheese, I love it. Yeah, my grandmother made maybe 5 recipes consistently throughout her whole life. Like, she's like, I know how to make pot roast, I know how to make fried chicken, I know how to make pork chops. And strangely, one of the things she knew how to make and loved were salmon patties. And she always used canned salmon, and it was my job to pick out the bones. And I'm like, if they could get it in the can, could they not take the bones out ahead of time? But she would make me take out the little bones. And yeah, they featured so heavily. And I don't know if it's because salmon was kind of comparable to tuna fish or what. But that was kind of like our fanciest dinner that we had that she made, for sure.
Man, we never had salmon. I'm gonna have to ask my mom why we did. We had deer all the time because my dad was a hunter, and so that's what he would come home with, and it would always be deer, and my mom would fry it because deer doesn't really taste very good, but it's expensive to buy like breading, so she would get like stale saltines and break them up and just put them and And then instead of when we couldn't afford mashed potatoes, she was like, white bread is just the same. So she'd just get old white bread and we tear it up into pieces, and then we put the gravy that she made out of the oil that was left after she fried the stuff. And and it was not until I was way into my 40s that I realized that people did not eat white bread as just a side meal, like covered in that was not just a normal thing
Oh no,
because it's delicious.
gravy was truly delicious because we always had bread, and my grandmother, everything she made had some kind of sauce with it. So it was always the next day, make a sandwich out of the pot roast with the gravy on the bread and the whatever tough piece of meat is left over. And
Mhm.
then the same thing with the pork chops and the same thing with the salmon cake. It's like there was always a sauce. So
Yes.
there's
The
use the bread.
season, whatever that thing was that you just couldn't choke down the day before, and you're hungrier now. So
Yeah.
now you're like, well, I can make it work. I'll just gnaw on this for a while. I'll dip it in some water. That's fine.
There was always that cup of fat in the refrigerator. So you're like, maybe I'll put some fat in a frying pan and try that way. Like we were very ingenious about being poor.
Oh my God, was your fat in the Crisco thing, and you'd open it up and you'd just be like, oh, why does it smell so good? And it looks so gross. And you
My grandmother always kept it in mugs, which is the ultimate deception because it'd be like, ooh, a mug of something. I'm like, oh, what the hell is it? Floating brown bits in it. And you're like, oh my God, this is a horror show.
so good.
Yeah, she
So
was
good. Oh
crazy.
my gosh. So my final question would be, what's next? What are you working on now? What's next in the pipeline?
Yeah, I'm working on this next book about Alaska. I'm definitely going to do something with The Ugly Cry as a movie, hopefully. And I'm just going to kind of, I'm currently doing my first job as a showrunner for a show on Amazon that Lena Waithe created. So I think I'm just going to kind of finish up those projects and then relax maybe. Like maybe by December I can just actually take a break.
You, you really should, because honestly, I think you've accomplished at least 4 times as much stuff as me, and I think I'm 5 years older than you are. So if you could maybe just take a little break and let the rest of us just hang out for a year, then that'd be okay, right?
I'm gonna come, but my definitely next on my list is I'm coming to San Antonio because Nowhere is gonna open, and I'm gonna be there, and I want to just roam those aisles and look at those shelves and look at
Oh my
all the art
gosh.
pieces that you've been collecting this year. This
Oh
year,
my, I'm so excited about it. It's gonna happen. And you know what you can do too is you can do whatever you want. You can come in and you could be a bookseller for the day, or you could work the bar, or you could we don't have the bar. I don't know when that'll open. I don't know when the store will open. Probably July, but the bar probably further on. But you could do anything. You could be like, you could put a little table up that just says, "Ask me what I should read next." Or you can just go incognito and be like, no one talk to me. I'm just here to read.
shelves, I'll face books, like I'll do the whole thing. I've worked in several bookstores. I will do whatever is needed.
Oh my God. I love it. You are totally on. I'm so excited. I'm so ready for all of this stuff to happen for you. And I'm so happy that I got to read this book. And I'm so happy that you came and did this, because this was so
You.
much fun. And this is actually the most exciting thing that I have done in the last month, maybe 2 months. Maybe not that much.
It was
So
definitely something to look forward to, and I appreciate that greatly. And it's again like thank you for helping me bring this book out into the world. It means so much to me, and again, especially because you're someone, you understand how it can be to put a very personal story out into the world. You've done it several times. So I'm just
yes.
I'm grateful that I feel like you've been shepherding me through this process, and it's
Oh,
been just wonderful.
well, I do what I can. Oh, and I will say one thing before we go. People have a tendency, like when I did the book tour, people were like, "Oh, I really liked that it was a virtual and I got to like hang out at home and do all that, but I didn't get to take pictures." So I will say, if you are at home and you're like, "Oh, I want a picture," just take your laptop and turn it around and get your camera, and we'll smile nicely. And so for the next 5 seconds, we'll smile lovely. all enjoyed it, and books will probably be going out. My guess is probably the next day or two once the book plates come. And thank you to everybody who tuned in, and thank you, Danielle. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Jenny, and thank you to everyone at your store as well who helped put this on.
They're fantastic. I love them.
Till next time.
Bye.